Great.
Okay. Briana, thank you so much for being here on this early morning for you. I'm really excited to just kind of sit and have some chatting around the beauty and the grace and the love that you bring to the world.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So my first question is about meditation. And I know that for me in the past couple of years, I've always pushed meditation aside as something that number one, I don't have time for. And number two, I cannot get my mind to quiet and calm long enough to have it be useful. I've since figured my way through it. Some of your meditations have been helpful in that. But for the Summit friends that are just getting started in their own journey with meditation, what are some practical tips that you would give for that? Like the mind being too busy or feeling like we don't have time?
Yeah. Well, first, I guess I would say that is 100% how it is for everybody. So if you like sit down, meditation is easy for you the first time, then you're either like a child or a saint. And I don't know. Um, it is. So it's just really normal. And I think that a lot of times we don't know what's going on for other people. Like we see other people and, you see somebody meditating where it's like cross-legged, their eyes are closed. They all look peaceful. Whether or not they actually are peaceful is something that we don't know. And so just to like remember that that's where everyone starts. And I think that there's like a huge amount of forgiveness that is necessary. And not even necessary isn't even that exactly the right word. It's like almost like an invitation for forgiveness to like really learn like, okay, I'm going to do something and it's going to be hard and I'm not going to be good at it. And my mind's going to be racing. And then how can I forgive myself for having my mind be racing? And then, for my thoughts coming up and for wanting to give up all of those things. So I actually feel like the beginning of meditation, in the beginning, meditation is not that, like, it's very hard to like reach that, like euphoric feeling.
Yeah.
It's actually, you just have to kind of do it. It's like if you were going to run a marathon in the beginning, it doesn't like feel great to run, right? It really like doesn't feel good to run. And there's actually like very little benefit. You're going to like, this sucks. Same with meditation. It's like the beginning kind of sucks. Except that in the beginning, there's this other invitation, which is the forgiveness part, which I think is like really such a nice little gift. I feel like it's like your little door prize for entering. Like if you can get into forgiving yourself for not being good at it, then you still win.
Yeah.
Even if your meditation is just full of you thinking about your grocery list and then forgiving yourself for doing so, you still are practicing in such a beautiful way. But as far as like an idea of how to really start meditating, I think that, of course, the number one meditation for everyone is just to follow your breath. And I actually think that perhaps we're just built this way just simply so that we have this mechanism to bring us to now. Our breath isn't in the future. It's not in the past. It's really happening right now. And it's the way in which we take in the entire world, really, and exhale. It is such a miracle. And so I think even if you can do, even if that's all you can do is sit down for 1 minute and pay attention to your breath and really be with your breath for 1 minute, it's a really great place to start. And the biggest difference between not meditating and being somebody who is like excelling, is it that even a thing? Somebody who has a great meditation practice isn't like the difference between, doing it 5 minutes or doing it for an hour. The biggest difference is doing it or not doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's all you really have to do is just do it, whether or not it's for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. If it's even just for 1 minute, if you can really spend even 1 minute paying attention to your breath in the beginning, that is enough.
That's such amazing permission, because I feel like when I talk with people, what holds people back is that feeling of, I don't know how to master it. I don't have an hour. I can't imagine becoming at that state where I meditate for a long period of time. But to just give yourself permission to just do it, and the act of meditation, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So one thing that I love about the work that you guys do, you and your partner, Peter, I've been using the deep sleep meditation that you guys have. And oh my goodness, that's been really life-changing. And I say that not to be trite, but to really, there's power in the way that we put ourselves to sleep. Can you talk, this is a question I didn't prepare you for. Um, but can you talk a little bit about why that works? And for those of you that aren't familiar with the deep sleep meditation, it's a process. I think it's maybe 3 minutes long. I plug in with headphones when I lay down at night. I don't always make it through to the end. My husband is kind of on alert to turn off my phone and take out my headphones because I never make it through. But I've been sleeping so much better because I'm using that. Why does that happen?
I think a large part of why like that meditation works is because we actually are walking you through a process of like decreasing your frequency, because we're like often like, here I'm buzzing, and then we're like, okay, now I'm going to go sleep, and we expect ourselves to just like flip over into like sleep, which is so hard to do. It's not, we are, especially if we key our systems up all day long, then to just switch into sleep is really difficult. So that meditation just kind of walks you through the levels of getting you deeper and deeper into a state where you would sleep. So instead of just lying down and expecting yourself to magically like turn that switch, which obviously most of us do eventually, it kind of walks you through a process of getting into that state. And I just think that, even if you don't have somebody doing it for you in your earphones, just like doing that for ourselves, like really relaxing all the parts of our body and inviting ourselves into a new state, like actually creating an invitation into the next thing that we're doing. And there's this transition thing that we can do all the time between all sorts of things, between awakeness and sleepness and awakeness, and, family life and work life. And there's all these different transitions, and transitions are such an opening for us to insert ritual. And as we insert ritual into them, it can often make those transitions easier and definitely makes them more meaningful. And I have a toddler who's 2. And I'm just like becoming the queen of transitions now. I'm like, oh, it's just nice to see somebody expressing their challenge with transitions so obviously. And I'm like, I think that so many humans are feeling this way, but we are like a little bit above throwing a temper tantrum about it.
A little bit sometimes.
A little bit. So just like the ways in which now we like, her nanny and I have a song, like a transition song that we sing. So when we're transitioning her from one of us to the other one, we sing a song for her. And it's the same song, and we both sing it. And then one of us leaves and the other one continues to sing it. There's just these little things that we can do in our own lives to make transitions a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that. So speaking of transitions and habits and patterns, I recently went on a challenge and a personal journey for myself to be alcohol free. That was for a number of reasons and for a number of weeks. And I realized very quickly on that mindset was everything for this process. How do you personally dismantle and then rebuild your habits and patterns through mindset?
Oh, that's a great question. I just recently went off of dairy, which, by the way, I think I've said several times in my life, like, you could take anything away from me, but you try to touch my cheese, I would be like losing my.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, okay, I can go without dairy. I feel like it's actually like maybe the biggest challenge ever. I'm like, alcohol, caffeine, sugar, anything. I can get.
It's really hard because it is such a part of every day, and it's in so many things.
And it's so comforting. And I also just love cheese. It's just so good. And to change that habit, I think one of the first things that we can do to help do that is, like, instead of making it something that's put upon us, really coming from choice about it. Because often, even right after we make a choice, we pretend that somebody else made us do that. And then we're like, oh, now I can't do that. And then we want to rebel. Right. And that is so common. It's common for me too. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to eat dairy. Why can't I eat dairy? Like, screw everyone. I'm like, nobody's doing this to you but you. This is so weird.
Right.
So instead of having that, like, I can't, this is being put upon me, kind of feeling about it, instead coming to like an empowered position. And there's so many studies about our languaging around what we're going to do and not do. And one of the most powerful is to just say, I don't. Like, And right now I'm in like, I don't eat dairy. And that's like a choice. And it's a very strong place to be coming from rather than I can't. And when we think we can't do something, I mean, I don't know, I guess I can really speak for myself, but when I think I can't do something, I'm like, yes, I can.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
So I think that wording, it actually creates a mindset shift as well. It really becomes an empowered place of making a change. I also think that with our habits, if we enter into them without like a lot of thought or reasoning, it makes it very hard to hold on to a new habit. Yeah. But I often like to write out like, okay, well, why am I doing this? And like really diving into like, I'm making this change for these reasons. And, for me, like dairy is like, I want to find out if I have an allergy to dairy. Like I actually don't want to know kind of, but I really do want to know. Right. And, I have celiacs. And so I am like very allergic to gluten, which is actually very related to being allergic to dairy. And so, just writing this all out for myself, like not even like actually writing those sentences, like I have an allergy to gluten, which means I might have an allergy to dairy. And I want to find that out because I want to feel the best I can in my body. And then like, why do I want to feel the best I can in my body? And then these are the reasons. Like, I want to be able to be active with my children. I want to be able to work my land. I want to be, I want to be 80. We have an 81-year-old neighbor who comes and like mows our lawn sometimes. And he's like so vibrant. Like, I want to be like Stu when I'm 81. So there are all sorts of reasons. And if we can like really walk ourselves through that, journaling is a really useful way to like get ourselves on board with a change. Yeah. And then if there's something I want to stop doing, as well, then I create a similar, like, these are the reasons why, and also creating a time frame. So I think the other thing that's really hard is if we don't give ourselves a time frame around new habits, especially if we're like trying to cut something out or wanting to add something in, like, don't just say you're going to do something forever. Like, say that you're going to do something maybe for 10 days or 2 weeks or a month, and then say at that point, I'm going to reevaluate, because then it gives you something to be successful towards and be like, oh, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to make that happen. And then you can evaluate. And if it's different, if you decide that that wasn't really working for you, or you want to change your agreement around that in some way, you have a really clean container to make sure that that happens, and you can feel really good about yourself.
I like that. And then what piece of it really is empowering too, because then you can say, okay, yes, I felt this way, or yes, I invited this back in. And I think the same is, like you said, true in reverse. If you're inviting something new in, that you could say, I do, instead of I don't.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I also have been going through your Rituals for Transformation book. There's been pages that I have not liked.
Oh, good.
Pages that I skipped, and I will go back to. But one of the pages, or the series of pages, that have been ridiculously impactful for me have been on inner agreements. And I know, and maybe it's just a female thing, maybe it's a woman thing, I'm really good at holding to my agreements to other people. If I say I'm going to do something for someone else, or if I say I'm going to show up, I do. And people can relax knowing that I'll honor my word. But then it comes to my own inner agreements and those things that I've said that I would do for myself, and they just seem to fall away. Can you talk a little bit about that? And inner agreements might be something that some of our listeners aren't familiar with. So can you explain what they are, and then also talk about what happens when we as humans continuously kind of fail to keep our inner agreements?
Yeah. So inner agreements are things you tell yourself that you're going to do. Often there are things you're going to do for yourself. Maybe it's that, you're going to start meditating, or you're going to journal, or, you're going to talk nicely to yourself. And, we make these inner agreements with ourselves, and nobody else is watching, or at least, no other like alive human is watching. And so we make these agreements, and then because there's no one else to feel like we're disappointing, we often just don't keep them. And we don't even apologize to ourselves for not keeping them, which we would normally do with anyone else. And The importance of inner agreements, I don't think that there's anything more important than trusting yourself. Because when you trust yourself to really like do whatever you say you're going to do for other people and for yourself, it totally changes the game. You're then like really able to feel like you can do anything. I know that anything I put on my calendar, I'm going to do because I agreed to it. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that things don't come up and I don't like change my agreements and like have to clean things up. And there's a lot of things that come up because we're human. But if our intention is to always keep our agreements, and for the most part we do, we've changed the game within ourselves from being one of feeling like, well, I generally kind of maybe don't really do what I say I'm going to do. So then when you set off to do something bigger, whether that's, deepen your spiritual practice or create a company, yeah. If you don't have the inner trust to know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, it's going to be a really hard road, because the whole time you're going to be like, oh, well, maybe I'll do that, but I kind of doubt I will because I haven't done any of the other things I said I was going to do. Right. So keeping our outer agreements, obviously important. Keeping our inner agreements, I think, is actually even more important, because you're on both sides of the equation in that one. You're like the one breaking the agreement and the one that's getting the agreement broken with. Yeah. So you're starting to kind of create a relationship with yourself of one that is of like dislike, like if you had a friend that constantly broke agreements with you, you pretty soon would not be friends with them. And our relationship with ourselves is so important. And people have all this idea of like self-love and all, and I'm like, yes, of course, self-love, but there's a way to get there, like just like you would with anyone. And one of those things is to keep your agreements with yourself, show up for yourself, do what you say you're going to do, and really honor this human. Yeah. And as you do that, you start to create this really sweet relationship with yourself where you're like, oh yes, you do what you say you're going to do. You speak nicely to me. Yeah. You're the one that's going to care for me. And the other thing is that it stops us from putting our needs for feeling good on other people.
Because we want to take care of that ourselves.
Yeah, because we're taking care of that ourselves. Like, not to say like people in my life don't make me feel good about myself. They do. Like, people are kind and sweet and generous and loving, and I receive that. But I already feel that way anyway. Like, I already feel delighted in myself. I'm like, I already know that I'm good enough. I already know that I'm worthy. And it doesn't matter what I create. And then when I create something that people don't like, I'm like, that's okay, because I like it, because I created it. And it creates this, you don't need so much approval. And when you don't need so much approval, you have so much more freedom. And the more freedom you have, the more you're actually able to help people, because I don't need people to like me. I want to help people, and that's my choice, but I don't do it so that they'll like me.
Right. Well, it almost opens up space for affirmation, so that when someone makes you feel good or says that they really appreciate something you've done, it's only affirming what you already know to be true about yourself. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I like that you wrote around the inner agreements is that by holding to your inner agreements, you allow the mind to settle. And the mind doesn't have to have this rotating dialogue around, are you going to fail again? You're going to fail again. Are you going to fail again? Instead, the mind just knows that you're going to do what you said you're going to do. And it's been really huge. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
The current state of affairs in our world today. You recently posted on Instagram some things around your feeling around unity, our right to protest. What do you focus on? How do you hold tight to your personal truth and keep that going for yourself? And also, how do you use, this is a little bit different of a question, how do you use the platform that you have, your audience, the people that look to you, to provide something that can speak to a world that maybe feels like it's crumbling around us?
Yeah, I feel like this is like the hardest question in the world, but a really good one. It's interesting. I know that my job here on this planet is to be a light holder. Like, I am like really clear that I am not, my job is not to get into, there are people that are here for different reasons. And there are definitely some people that are like to be like front lines, doing being activists. And those people I super support. And then there are people that need to like work within the system to try to make differences. And I think they also need a lot of support, and I definitely do that. And then I really know, and this is like such a hard thing to express, but that I know that my job is to be a light holder and like a truth teller. And my only job is to remember that everyone is God, and to reflect that to everyone I can. Like, even if they disagree with me, even if they do things I terribly disagree with, that I can see in them something that they can't even see in themselves. And I actually kind of course, because it's my job, I think it's the hardest job. Probably everyone thinks their job is the hardest job. But it's a challenge for me to do. And yet I know that every day when I wake up, that's what I'm here to do. And to just hold the light and to say, this is where we're going. Like, this is the truth. Unity is the truth. We, even no matter where we get off path, here is the truth. And I also feel like that inspires me to speak. I don't really, there's like, people that just hold the light and that are just like about love and light, and they don't want to get involved in politics. And to me, that's just not my place. I feel like, and I don't know what's going on for them. And maybe it could be fear of being judged. It could be a lot of things. It could be that they just really, truly don't feel like that's their place in this lifetime, which is also okay. But I really feel like I care. I like care about what's going on. And I think that there's a way of hopefully like speaking the truth that people can then see from both sides. And, yesterday I posted something on my Facebook page, and this woman was like, I don't think that you should be talking about politics because you're somebody who is like kind of a spiritual leader. And I was like, oh, well, A, this is my personal Facebook page and I'll talk about whatever I want. Like, don't like me.
Yeah.
But B, like, my job is to do everything I can to create peace. And sometimes that means speaking up. And I think that the more that we can speak up and listen and question and be in a conversation together, the more we're able to then uncover some of these major issues that are happening. Yeah. And so, I'm not very divisive in my thinking of people. Like, I'm not like them, they suck. Like, people are confused. People, all kinds of people are confused. And so many people have lost their way and feel so disconnected from their divinity. Mm-hmm. And that's happening on both sides. Like, this is really happening for so many people. And, I don't think I've been more attacked by people that I agree with than people that I don't agree with. And I'm like, yeah, so I just think that remembering that if we really truly believe that we're all united and we really truly believe that we're all God, then how do we interact with each other? How do we bring up discussions? How do we disagree? Because even if people say things that I think are outrageous, I'm more inclined to say, okay, so where's that coming from? If we can be curious, we learn so much and we help them learn so much. There was this gentleman that my husband and he was overseas for a long time. He came back and he really had like PTSD, and his wife was like, I'd really like to give him a dream book, but we can't afford it. And you're like, that's fine, we'll send it to him, no problem. So we sent it to him. It really made a big difference in his life, but we could not think more differently about the world. Like, we just totally disagree. Yeah. And yet, so he like, I'll like say something on my Facebook page and he'll be like, that's bullshit. And I'm like, all right, great, let's talk about it. Right. And my interactions with him have been so enlightening. Yeah. And we talked a lot about the Affordable Care Act. It was like one of the big things that we were disagreeing about. And he was like, I was like, well, why do you feel that way? And he was like, my dad died because we couldn't afford health insurance. And I'm going to make sure that never happens for my kids. And I said, I want to make sure that doesn't ever happen to anyone. Like, do you see why if Affordable Care Act had been around when your father was ill, it would have helped him and then he wouldn't have died? And instead you're taking it the other direction. But I wonder if you thought about like the fact that there are people out there with fathers that without Affordable Care Act, their fathers will die. And how does that feel to you? And I don't know for sure that I changed his mind about Affordable Care Act, but it definitely softened him into like, and both of us softened. We both were like, okay, well, what is it? Being curious about each other. And we were able to understand each other. And then you're able to be like, oh, okay. And is there a right and wrong here? No, there's just two people coming from different places. And how can we come together? And what do we agree on?
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking for agreement. Like, okay, we both agree that people shouldn't die. Like, right? Like, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
And then what else do we agree on? And how can we build upon what we agree on rather than just doing this? Because just doing this doesn't really get anyone anywhere. So building upon that is, it's been really a fun experiment. I had a friend the other day. She was like, why are you so nice to these idiots on your Facebook page? Like, because they're not idiots, because they're not. I disagree with them. And maybe I do. Sometimes people are not as educated about a subject. But they're still humans, and they're just doing the best they can, and everyone has their thoughts and feelings and beliefs because of their own history. And we can't take that away from them. All we can do is meet them where they're at, see that they are God, and move forward together in unity. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. And we have been, as a family, watching What Would You Do with John Kionis. We've got 2 teenagers, and so it's one thing that we can all sit down around the TV and watch together. And that's been a discussion that we've had a lot, is that, are you familiar with the show?
I'm not.
So they have a play act that happens. So like one was a little girl at an ice cream store ordering, and she had Tourette's, and she was bullied by 2 other kids that were there. And what they're doing is watching what bystanders that don't know that it's all an act, what do bystanders do? Do they engage? Do they protect? Do they come to the aid of somebody, or do they not? And then they have a discussion afterwards. And our family's discussion over the last couple of weeks has been, everyone comes from a place of their perspective and their filters and their, what they've taken away from the life that they've lived. And that impacts the discussions we're having. And I like what you said about, because it's not just about listening. Listening's great, but if you're not curious enough to then ask the next question, you're not going to get anywhere. So I really like that. So yeah, it's something that is a start. Like, we need to all see the beauty in each other, see the God in each other, and then take it to the next level and have a conversation about it. Yeah, I like that. What is your personal mantra? Do you have one? Do you have something that you go back to, that you rely on?
So all of my mantras are in Sanskrit, so I don't know that it would mean much to anyone else. I read that and I was like, I don't know if I can, I'll share it anyway. But so the mantra, my family does lots of mantras together, but I would say the one that recently is like the one that I'm like doing all the time is because Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Swarupinye Namaha. And it's Shakti is like the female creative energy. And the idea of it is like Icha Shakti is like where the desire to create starts. So it's like inside all of us, there's that like, I like experience it as like kind of like a tickling, like bubbly feeling of like, oh, I want to create. Jnana Shakti is the alignment with the next thing. So making sure that like, as it's bubbling through you, that there's then like alignment then to like the Kriya Shakti, which is like like what you would see as creation. Okay. So this is all like one part of creation where it's like, first you have the desire, then you have the alignment, then you have the actual creation, the action. And I love this mantra because it reminds me to make sure that like that I'm honoring the like the Icha Shakti, the like desire to create, which is very much alive in me, and then making sure that like, okay, and that is aligned for me. And I feel like that's probably the hardest part for most people, because like a lot of us feel the bubbling up and then we just do the thing.
Right. Without the alignment. Yeah.
Without alignment. And alignment's a little bit of a tricky thing for a lot of people to feel into if they haven't spent a lot of time in like the world of meditation, or like just diving deep into themselves, or even reflecting upon what would be in alignment for them. And so I feel like that's where there's a lot of beauty available to people if they haven't yet explored that, is to figure out like, oh, how do I know I'm in alignment? How do I feel that? Like, what is that feeling inside of me? And then how does it get expressed in a way that is true the whole way through? And I've noticed a lot for myself recently with clients that I've been working with. I've been, I do these like deep like soul session things where we're basically just like talking to God about you. But one of the major things I see often, especially with entrepreneurs, is non-alignment. They have this desire, and then they're like, it's almost like the things that are created are actually being pulled from outside and being brought in. So it's actually not even connected to their desire, which is so interesting, because they had the desire. They were like, yes, the desire is there. But then they like look on the internet and they look on Instagram and they get really distracted, which I can speak for myself. I've definitely gotten distracted by Instagram. So I'm not like, no judgment. It just happens. But, people will be like, oh, this is the business I want to create. And I'm like, okay, first of all, those words aren't even yours. Like, I can't even feel them in your system. Like, energetically, they don't resonate with who you are in any way. So I know that they came from somewhere else. So either they're somebody else's words, or they were inspired by somebody else, but they don't have any resonance in your field. So how do we create from our own selves? And it's a lot more satisfying. And it also means doing the work, and so to try to have that bubbling desire actually be what comes through, because that is what everyone's like very unique, special places in the world. And we don't need a bunch of what somebody else is doing. Like, they're already doing it, which is amazing. And so therefore you're kind of already doing it because we're all connected. So maybe you can just get satisfaction by the fact that it's already happening.
They're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're kind of already doing it. You can just be like, I'm already doing that as that person.
Doesn't that then help our energy to be better used if we're in that true alignment? Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love that. I can talk to you about that time, I think. So you are in this space of putting yourself out there for people. You constantly create, you have content, you have beautiful products, you own spas. Like, you're in this place to be a light holder. And I can imagine that sometimes you need a reset, or you need encouragement, or you need to refuel. What do you do during those moments? Where do you go? What's your place for refueling?
I feel like I have so many things I do. Well, I really actually feel like meditation for me is like, it's like the thing I look forward to every day. I'm like, oh yeah, I get to meditate. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I get to meditate longer today. That's so great. So meditation for me is really like the biggest thing I can do. I get a lot of guidance in my meditation. So I feel like especially if I feel confused, or like I'm not sure where to go, or I'm not sure how to respond to something, I get a lot of answers there. So, and then I also go to my girlfriends. I have like several groups of really close girlfriends, and I go to them, and then they all tell me to go meditate. So it's kind of like, well, they're like, did you ask God yet, Briana? I'm like, no, I wanted you to answer me. Yeah. So, but I do get a lot of really wonderful support from my girlfriends. So I call on them a lot. I mean, I feel like I text my girlfriends every day for sure. And then my husband too. I mean, he has like he always holds like a different perspective, which is really good for me. He tends to he's like a little bit more practical than I am. About some things, and then other things I'm way more practical. I don't know. That's like not a wholly true statement, but he's more practical about some, like, especially when I'm having like a hard time about certain things. He starts to be like, okay, well, what is about like your circumstances? Maybe you're working too much, or maybe you have too much on your plate. And then I like to take hot baths. I do that a lot. Or like go on walks on my land, and I also really love to dance. So just like moving my body. And that's actually the thing that probably helps me stay the most sane, but I tend to like forget about it. That's like the thing where I'm like, oh, I'll be like, oh, I haven't danced in like a week. Oh yeah, that's why I'm feeling like this. And so dance is a huge one. And then just, turning off the phones, turning off all the things and really being with my children. Even when they're like being crazy, there's like a way in which it's so simple, they're so simple. It's like simple and it feels complicated for them. And sometimes when I'm interacting with them, it feels complicated
Right.
for me. But, there's a simplicity around like what they're wanting, and the way in which they both express themselves is very sweet. And, I feel like they're both such great teachers. So I come back to them a lot too.
That's awesome. So we're wrapping up. Is there anything we've covered quite a bit, and on all the things that we've talked about, we could go on and on and on. Is there anything else that you'd like our Summit friends to know or to sit with as they end the session with you, Briana?
I think that the number one thing I really want everyone to know in the world is just that they are full of divinity. And even if you're not aware of it, your life is being played out in this like really beautiful way. It's only that you're not aware of it, that you're not feeling it. And so just bringing your awareness to all the beauty and all the miracles and all the ways in which God is trying to live through you as you, and you have a very important seat in the web of the universe that if you're willing to really claim will flow through you and change the world. And I feel like I feel like what I want for everyone is just for them to take their seat in the web of the universe and let it flow through them. And so if you don't feel like you've done that yet, it's good to try to explore that and find your place.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time and for your honesty and your willingness to share. We're going to have all of the links to all of the amazing things that you have below so that people can check you out. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to speak with you.